My name's Brent Sellers. The article in the proceedings, as well as the article in the most recent Cattlemen's, is what I'm talking about today. So many of you know Smutgrass, right? Does anybody not know what Smutgrass is?
Oh yeah, I know what it is.
If you don't, you probably will at some point in your life. All right, so cattlemen have been fighting Smutgrass for the last 60 to 70 years. Dr. Hodges, that was introduced this morning, he was one of the first ones to work on it here in the 1950s. Did quite a bit of work on the small variety. Now we have the giant, what we call the giant Smutgrass. It's pretty much become the dominant species. So we have two, more so giant in this part of the state. As you go further north, it tends to turn into the small variety, but giant is progressively moving northward in the state as well. So the study that I'm going to talk about, that I'm not showing you today because it's another half mile that way, and it would take forever to get there in these trailers, so I just decided to stop here and talk about it. This is part of my PhD students' work, and it was also funded by the Cattlemen's, and it's the impact of rainfall on Velpar activity. So I'm going to back up a little bit and kind of tell you why I decided to look at this, or why we decided to look at this. Several years ago, when my previous PhD student, when she was working on her project, we did a multi-year study where we applied Velpar 2 years in a row. And we were very successful, so I was really excited about that project. All right? So I started talking about that with growers, and some people tried it and had success, others not so much. I said, well, I'm going to do this work on larger plots. So that's what was initially behind me, was another long-term study on a bigger area, so we could generate some better data, more replicable to what the growers have. Tried this 3 years in a row, failed every time. I'd never got any Smutgrass control with Velpar. And on top of this, I was meeting with some clients on complaints with Velpar, and I was asking about rainfall, and it was kind of all over the board. So some people would get 3 inches of rainfall after application, they'd be okay. Some people would get 7 inches, it'd be a complete failure. Or some people would get no rain, it'd be a failure. So we really wanted to hone in on how rainfall does impact Velpar activity on Smutgrass. So the first thing we did is we started in the greenhouse. We grew plants in the greenhouse, and if you ever want to grow Smutgrass, it takes forever. Okay, just so you know that. If you ever want to grow it, it takes forever. But we got them growing well, got some pretty nice clumps. We sprayed Velpar at 2 quarts to the acre on these pots. We let them dry for 4 hours. Then we simulated rainfall at 0 to 10 inches within the same day. And what the greenhouse research showed us was, as long as we had 1/4 of an inch, we had good activity. We got above an inch of rainfall in the greenhouse, activity dwindles to nothing. So that really surprised me, and I was hoping that's really not what's going to happen in the real world, because we really destroy a lot of things with the soil in the pots in the greenhouse. So my student started a project where we started in late April, early May. Every Friday, he'd go out and spray Smutgrass with 2 rates of Velpar. Every Friday through September. So he was out there spraying plots every week. We also had a rainfall data logger, so we knew when rain fell and how much rain fell, and he could track that throughout the growing season as well. So basically what we did is we really looked at the rainfall within the first 7 days after each application. And as long as we had at least 1/4 inch of rainfall in the field, and if we had no more than 3 inches of rainfall in the field, our Velpar activity was good. If we got over 3 inches of rainfall, all bets are off. It's not going to kill it. If we got no rainfall, a lot of times it didn't kill it. We did notice this past year, when the soil got saturated, we tend to get better activity overall. But still, if we got no rainfall within that 7 days, it didn't kill the smutgrass. And the other thing that we learned from this is if we didn't get rainfall within that 7 days, but we did the next 7 days, we still didn't get activity. So it looks to be that our window for rainfall after application is very small. So that's something that we just, not that we can control rainfall or how much rainfall we get. If we could, right, we wouldn't have brown grass right now. But at least you know if something happens, you can look at rainfall records and say, okay, that's why. Unfortunately, that doesn't help with the cost of the application, right? All right. So that kind of summarizes, that study that's in the proceedings. It's also in the Cattleman's Magazine. If you have other questions about that, feel free to ask me. I'm going to talk about some other stuff related to smutgrass that we're working on, mainly because of what Joe said earlier, practical experience from the producers. So there's a couple things that have happened over the past couple years. I know some people here may have tried already. A couple growers over in Okeechobee County have started using glyphosate over the top of Bahia grass at a quart per acre, and have been selectively controlling the smutgrass that way. Obviously, some Bahia grass injury occurs with that. How much happens, I'm not sure. That's something that we're going to be looking at in the next year or so. We also, working with the Seminole tribe, they have so much smutgrass they're trying to use it. So they repeatedly mow it to keep it young and tender enough where the cattle will graze it. So they're asking, is there a way to slow the growth down? I said, well, of course there is, but it's going to require herbicide. So we were chemically mowing smutgrass last year with different rates of glyphosate. We started at 4 ounces and worked our way up to 32 ounces. And it was applied about 2 to 3 weeks after it was mowed. So yeah, we did slow down growth with the lower rates, but what really shocked me was the level of kill that we had on the smutgrass at the higher rates. So at 16 ounces, so a pint to the acre, we were getting 60 to 70% kill smutgrass. That really surprised me. You double the rate to 32 ounces or a quart, we were getting 80 to 90% kill. So that made me think about the practical experience of the producers then. So, well, there's something to this, and maybe this is something we need to investigate further. So that is a project we're starting this year, looking more closely at that. Repeating the chemical mowing study, but also looking at the activity on smutgrass with the glyphosate. The other thing we did this past year was there's 3 studies behind me. I'm not going to show all of them to you, but I'll talk about each one of them briefly. The first one, we looked at application volume of the spray. So we applied 10 gallons to the acre spray solution, 20, 30, or 40 gallons to the acre. Okay? As long as we were at 20 gallons to the acre or above, it was pretty consistent. 10 gallons to the acre isn't enough. Okay, so I had some questions about that in the past, so I was trying to answer some of those. We'll probably repeat that again this year just to confirm that, but it looks like we need at least 20 gallons to the acre of spray solution for it to be effective. The second study we looked at here, we were looking at impregnating dry fertilizer with Velpar. My idea behind this was we could actually slow down the release of Velpar into the soil solution so it'd be around a little bit longer if we did get 3 to 5 inches of rainfall. Well, if we had optimum rainfall, everything worked great, okay? So we're going to continue to look at that, but we did get good results with impregnating the dry fertilizer. So that was pretty promising. The last one is another practical experience, more of a question from my perspective. So I had some applicators stating that if they tank mixed Velpar with Grazenext, that they thought they were getting better smutgrass control and better long-term control. In my brain, that doesn't make sense to me because that herbicide shouldn't have activity on grasses. But it is possible, being that these seed are so small. So it's something that we're looking at. Right now, it's too early to tell what's going to happen. But again, rainfall is optimum when we put this study out, so everything looks pretty even right now. But we'll know more this summer when we go back out to these plots and reevaluate them. Does anybody have any questions? I covered a lot of different topics on the smutgrass.
Doing any weed wipe?
Good question. Am I doing any weed wiping? That is another part of my students' project. We have 2 different studies out, one close by and another one over in Lake Placid. And we're testing different concentrations with the weed wiper, and 1 pass versus 2 passes. So we started at 7.5% and worked all the way up to 70%. And then again, 1 or 2 directions, mowed and unmowed. So it's kind of a tricky study to put out, but yes, we are doing that. And right now it looks like 35% looks pretty good. 10% is not enough, for sure.
Which herbicide?
Glyphosate, sorry. That was glyphosate.
Did the age of the growth on the Smutgrass impact the kill rate?
Did the age of the growth of the smutgrass impact
More tender, younger?
with glyphosate?
Comes back, then your herbicide, is that a better kill than I'm sure it is in that older, but was there a certain height that you wasn't getting any kill at all?
So you're asking with glyphosate, for the regrowth height, is there a certain height where we're not getting kill? As long as the plants are actively growing, I think you're going to end up with pretty good kill. Like a lot of people have asked me about wiping this time of year. I said, have you mowed it or have you burned it? If you've done neither, then it's not going to work. We haven't really looked at regrowth height so much. We've really more so timed it 2 to 4 weeks after mowing to get, it grows back pretty quickly. I was really trying to get it before it started seeding out. One of the things we learned from our trip to Australia a few weeks ago, once it starts to flower, it will have viable seeds within 16 days. That's amazing. It's absolutely amazing.
I got a question.
Your question is there anything you can add to the glyphosate to help kill seeds?
Yeah.
Not really. The only thing you can do is time it so you're applying it before seed head production even begins. And then that's hard, you're right. Because it can start forming within 2 weeks after mowing, right? Yeah, and so it's tough. But I think once seed heads form, doesn't mean it's necessarily flowering yet. So I think you have a 3-week window. Okay, any other questions? Yes?
Unrelated to smutgrass, what's the best way to control thistles behind you besides mowing or whatever?
You know, I didn't even talk about that. So, what happens when you control smutgrass? You get another weed. So wherever you see the thistles out there is where we've had pretty good control of the smutgrass. Okay? I take them over smutgrass any day. The best thing is actually Graze-Next. You can spray that at, we normally apply 24 ounces to the acre. You can spray this with 16 ounces and knock them straight dead. It takes it a little bit, but it does kill them.
Kill them before they flower. Yeah, all those spores start going out.
Yeah, I mean, it's best to kill them before they flower. But even if they're flowering, I mean, you can still, even if some of these start flowering, there's still some coming behind them. They're going to flower too. So it's best just to go ahead and spray it regardless of what stage it's at. Any other questions?
Have you used any Grazon Next in your fertilizer?
Good question.
I know it's labeled, I think, before.
Yeah. So have I used any Graze-Next in the dry fertilizer yet? We tried this last year. Of course, everybody knows how dry we were last year. And the idea was to go out in the morning where we had a heavy dew. Well, we never really had a heavy dew last year, but we had a light dew, and we tried it. And when you compare it to a broadcast application, at least last year, the broadcast application won, hands down, which I would expect anyway. My colleagues in Texas, where they have some different species, absolutely love that technique. For me, the jury's still out.
I could see soda apples might
Yeah,
be okay for keeping them young ones from growing.
right. Yeah, so we're looking at that too, of course. So we're trying to figure that out and trying to figure out if it's even doable for this part of the world. But I think it's something interesting to look at. Kill two birds with one stone.
I guess I have one question.
Yes, sir.
Years ago, I know there were some applicators that were actually working with Velpar, and they were trying to up the volume of rate per acre in order to do just like you were doing, trying to get up to 40 gallons an acre. These guys were talking even as high as 100 gallons an acre.
Yeah.
Now, that of course, cost is sometimes prohibitive maybe, but can you apply enough of water at application to make up for the rainfall?
This question is, can you apply enough water at application to make up for the rainfall? And I've never gone that high because I think that's ridiculous. But, I mean, it's worth a shot, I guess. Something I could add to the treatments, this year and see. I don't think it's going to be enough to overcome it, honestly. I think it would take a lot more than that.
Good success, but the cost is prohibitive. So but I was just wondering if you'd ever considered that.
I hadn't, mainly because that's usually a spot treatment volume more so than a broadcast volume. The other thing I'll leave you with, I had a producer that talked to me this past year. He had a jigs pasture that was infested with smutgrass pretty badly. So he was going into the fall, and he's like, well, I'm going to spray this pasture with gramoxone, paraquat, and I'm going to burn it off, and the smutgrass is going to come back nice and tender. Can anybody guess what happened? Smutgrass never came back. So is that another option? Possibly. The only downfall is you're going to go in the winter with no grass. So that's something to think about. Could be an option, but I don't know that it's a logical option. Okay. Any other questions? Well, again, I thank everybody for coming today.